Hi, everyone. So as I was just introduced, I'm going to talk about error logging. This is a module that I have created a couple of months ago, maybe, exactly to help that. So today, we don't have any tool, we don't have anything inside UI5 library, and we don't have anything inside the tools available for UI5 and Fiori to help us with observability and monitoring in terms of what's going on when we deploy our applications, what's happening when users are running those applications. If you have any issues, we don't know. We wait for users to tell us. So I'm going to share two scenarios that maybe sound familiar for most of you guys. So the first one is you don't have a very sophisticated life cycle in terms of development for the applications that you have in-house. You don't have a CI/CD pipeline. You don't have a lot of automated tests. Maybe you have one or two, but not much. The coverage is not high. And you are still using old versions and old tools. So let's say you are still building your application using Grunt. And from time to time, you remember or somebody remembers you that some application has been deployed missing the component preload, which by the time when we were doing that manually was very easy to happen. And especially for newbies joining the team, they weren't aware of the processes. So sometimes they would miss the step. And then somebody would note that in production or in some advanced stage when we were testing, and then we would build again and start restarting the test phase. The second scenario is you do have a very sophisticated DevOps process. You have CI/CD pipelines, you have a lot of automation, unit tests, end-to-end tests. You are using VDI5, all the new and nice stuff. Your coverage is very high, but still sometimes when the app hits production, you do see some issues. You do have some tickets being triggered and raised by users saying that, oh, I have this issue, and ask, okay, what's happening? Then what needs to happen in this scenario is you do need to get the information from the user. You don't have any way to see or to understand what's happening in the front end. You are going to probably go through all the logs in ABAP, in your old data serves, in Gateway, and you see, okay, ABAP looks fine. My old data looks fine, or maybe the request not even hitting my backend, or maybe it's not even related to any requests. It's just some missing button or something weird happening in the UI. So in that scenario, or with that scenario in mind, I have created that module, which is going to just log pretty much everything that happens in terms of errors in the application. So let me just pick the right screen here. That's the application or the library that I have created, error collector. So everything that happens in terms of errors in the application are going to be collected. JavaScript errors, reference, syntax, type errors, unhandled rejection promises. So you have created your promise, you have the then, but you are not using the catch part, and that reject or that promise rejects, and then you are not able to handle that catch because you missed. The other thing that is going to be report or logged in that tool is the report API. So this is a new API that it's available in modern browsers, so it's not supported in Internet Explorer. And for this one, it logs a lot of new things. It logs all the deprecated things that you should not be using in the browser anymore. It logs whenever the browser crashes for whatever reason, not related to your application. It logs whenever you have some intervention issues with the browser. So it logs more things that are not just related with your application. It might be an error in the browser itself, but it's also going to be captured. If you are using a browser that doesn't support that, then that is not going to be logged, but the application is going to work, or the library is going to work because it doesn't call that straight away. The same thing for the UI5 log library. So if you are using UI5 log library in your application, and you should, everything that you logs through that library or everything is going to be logged in that module as well. So we have everything JavaScript native, everything browser related, everything that we have in the reporting API, and then we have everything that's being recorded and used in the logs inside UI5 library as well. So using that library that I have created is very easy. So you just need to load that, and this is it. It's going to create a global in your application, and from there you can start playing around with the information that's gathered. So I'm going to jump into some examples and show you guys how this is going to work. Just before, that module is going to only capture the errors, right? All the logs, everything. It doesn't do anything else other than that. The other option is to send that somewhere to a backend, but this module is backend agnostic. So it doesn't treat the data, it doesn't do any transformation, it doesn't convert to all data structures or REST APIs, generic REST APIs, whatever. It doesn't do. It just captures everything in a JSON structure. And if you want to send as is, you just pass the parameter and it sends to the endpoint that you set. And if you need to do something else more complex, like you need to use an data service to capture those logs, then you have the option to pass a callback. And then inside the callback, you are going to call your OData service. So let me just jump into the code here just to show you. So the first one, I'm going to just capture everything. So I'm not going to send the data anywhere, and we're going to see how that works. So I'm just loading very basic UI5, loading the library that I have created, the error collector. Then here is just rubbish, just creating all issues, just making sure that whatever I'm doing, it's going to create errors and issues in the application. Then if we jump back in here, we can see, let me just refresh. So this is the first one. We can see in the network, we don't have any requests, no requests in here, but we do have a lot of issues and errors in the console. And then all those errors, just to make that easier to visualize, I posted them in here on the page, on the body. So we can see we have type, the timestamp, we have the URI, just to make sure whenever we send that to the backend, we know which page generated the error. We have the stack, we have the message, we have components, level, elapsed time. So this is when it happened after loading the page. This is the timestamp, the full timestamp, and this is just, okay, it happened 3 seconds after loading the page. It happened 5 seconds, 8 minutes, whatever, after loading the page. And then we have the file name, if it's a JavaScript file that we have the issue, not the full URI, right? Then for the type, if it's a generic JavaScript error, we are going to have as an error. And then we have all these different types in here. So I have assigned a constant variable, try to change the value for a constant. This one, I tried to declare again a constant that I have created with this name. So I shouldn't do that. And let me see what else we have in here. The same here, assign it constant. Then that one, I'm trying to call a method that doesn't exist in that object. So I have my this, I tried to call this method, and that method doesn't exist. So it was captured in here, JavaScript, generic JavaScript error as well. Let me try to find another one. This is whenever we create our own error type, when we throw an error, then this is how it's going to be captured. This is the message that I have created. I will show you then later. This is the unhandled rejection. So I have a promise, I have the then part, but I don't have the catch. And this is the report API, that new API that I mentioned before, that's available in modern browsers. So it's saying okay, you shouldn't be using, where is that? Okay, yeah, so yeah, stored blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the one that I was expecting. Okay, I was expecting to see the one complaining about sync Ajax requests, but not this one. So yeah, it didn't trigger that one. And then later we have the UI5 one. So I called something inside the UI5 library, the logs, and then I have in here. So this is using the log library. So everything that use the UI5 log library, it's going to be captured in the error collector as well. This is the unhandled promise. We have the then, we don't have the catch. This is assigning a constant or try to change the value from a constant. This is calling the method that doesn't exist. This is throwing object error and so on. So this is just capturing, not doing anything with the errors, right? Not sending that to the backend. As you can see in the network tab, we don't have anything in here. So now we go to the second example, which is exactly the same code plus sending that to the backend. If I refresh, I'm going to see all the errors as we have seen before. Then in the network, I don't see any extra requests. It's just the same. And if I change my screen, I hide the page just to show you what I have added in here. So this is what I have added. So just setting the configuration for the library and setting my endpoint, setting what is my API, which is going to receive all the logs, right? If I go back to the application, then I can see, okay, I have a new request sent from the page. And then this is sending to whatever I have defined. So all the requests that we are going to see in that part of the demo, they are not going to work because I'm just using fake or dummy addresses in here. Is just to show how this is going to be sent. So we can see the payload is just a JSON with all the fields and data that we can see here on the body on the left. So what happens in here is to avoid having that issue that we do something, we have the error, and then we send the error straight away to the backend, just to avoid that performance degradation in the app or even to block whatever the user is trying to do. The module is going to listen for the visibility event. And every time that the app is hidden or the application is not visible anymore, if you change the tab or if you go to another window which completely closes and covers the page that you were before, this is going to be triggered. And then if it has been triggered once, then it's not going to try again, because the way that this is triggering or sending the request is using navigator send beacon. And then for the send beacon, we don't get any confirmation whether the process was 200 or the request was 200, 201, or whatever we are expecting from regular Ajax or fetch requests, right? So send beacon is going to send, and this is being used for just one reason. If we were just using or expecting that to be sent every time that we hide the page, that would be fine. But this is also going to be sent whenever we close the browser or we close the tab. So just to make sure that if we close the tab, we send and we make that request go through and hit the endpoint for sure, send beacon is the methods or the API to be used. If we were using fetch, Ajax, yeah, whatever we were trying to use, we wouldn't have guaranteed that the request would hit the backend. Using send beacon, the browser guarantees that, okay, I will wait for the request to hit the backend, and that's it. I'm not going to give you any answer, any response, but I'm going to make sure that that request is going to send and hit the backend. So that's the reason. So if you hide the page, if you navigate to a different window, different tab, or close the browser, the error log is going to be sent to the backend. Then the other example here is using more things from UI5 and trying to connect that to a no data service. So in that case, in here, we saw, let me just close this one. In that case here, we saw that I just set the endpoint and that's it. I didn't do anything, just that. So errors are collected, and whenever we hide the page or we close the page, the errors are sent to the backend. So now with UI5 and OData serves, what we are trying to do is using the OData model to send that request. And as I said, in the first example, is just a simple dummy request. We grab all the data and we send it to the endpoint. With OData, we need to use the model, we need to prepare the data, we need to do some stuff before. So to use that, we have an option to call a callback, to call a hook. And then that hook is going to be a function. Whatever you want to do inside the function is up to you. You have the option to set the server URL, and you have the option to get all the errors in case you want to transform the data, in case you want to filter the data before sending it to the backend, then it's possible. Or you want to enhance the data, add more information as you wish. So what I'm doing here in this example, I setting the endpoint, getting that from my model, my old data model that I have set somewhere in my manifest. Then I have my hook here with my function, my callback. I just looping through all the errors that I have. And for all errors, I'm creating new entries to be posted against my OData service, right? So I have an entity. That entity is a custom entity because, as I said, this is not anything standard that we have today in UI5 landscape. So I have created in the backend an OData service. That OData service expecting that structure. And here I'm just preparing the data, and then I'm sending everything in here. So this is what we have. And then we have in here a lot more UI5 errors. And then again, as I mentioned before, everything in here at this point is just dummy URLs. So we are not going to see anything connecting for sure. And so in here, just to show something when we are dealing with the UI5 log library, we have the type, right, as I mentioned, and then we have components. And then we can see that some components are going to be the components that I have created in my application. So this is my application setting the component. So I'm getting the logger and setting my namespace or my application, my ID, whatever I want to do, or my library, if that's the case. Then we can see here. So this is going to say, oh, the error is in application A, and that other error is in component B. And also, we are going to have errors like this one in standard UI5 libraries. So this one, it's complaining that, as I mentioned before, sometimes if you are using grunt and manual processes, we may forget to build the app and miss the component preloads. So this is complaining. If it was a real case scenario, that would be gone to production and we would have no idea that something was missing, right? Until somebody notices, until somebody complains. And then with this module now, we have the option to gather everything that is happening in terms of issues, in terms of problems in our application, send to an endpoint. Doesn't matter if the endpoint that we're going to use is OData services. If you are sending to SAP BTP, you have some BTP logging services or alert services you can use. Doesn't matter if you're using Azure, Google Clouds, or AWS CloudWatch, whatever log solution or whatever endpoint that you want to process and store that data, this is going to be the tool to do that. So it's as I said, the tool just collects the data, collects all the errors, and sends that to an endpoint, sends that to whatever you have decided, right? Whatever you want to do with the data is up to you. You just need to tell the module, what is the endpoint, and this is going to send to the endpoint. Okay, enough from this. Now let's go to the real application and see some real examples, right? So let me just see if the session is still up. All right, so here I have my BTP account. I have created and deployed my application to BTP, and then I'm going to run that application here. I'm going to have a lot of issues. So I can see all the errors again. Then this is just the body. I'm setting this one. It's not the module. It's not the library doing that. I'm doing that just to make that easier to visualize. So we can see it's pretty much the same errors that we saw on the other one. And then if we change here to network, we can see we don't have any posts. So I'm going to just clear this one. And then again, I would navigate to another tab, go back, and then we can see that something has been posted. And then we can see that is exactly what we were expecting. Okay, if this has been posted, then we can go to the backend in my BTP account. I can go to log services. And in this case, I'm using logging service from BTP, and we are going to visualize that in Kibana dashboard, just to see that a little bit easier. So we see all the logs in here, and we can also see that in here in a nicer way. So I'm going to navigate to this one. And I'm going to navigate to the errors only.
Mauricio?
Yep.
We're running a little bit out of time, and we do have a couple of questions. So
sorry about that.
That's okay. It's an interesting topic, of course.
So we can go to the questions, and I will just show the screens.
Okay. So I do have a couple of questions from the online community. First one, is the logger always active in production as well, or can you activate or deactivate it on the fly in production?
You can activate and deactivate. To do that, as I mentioned, let me just go back in here in the code. If you have set this property here, if you do have an endpoint as your target, this is going to be used. This is going to send to the backend, right? So let's say I want to activate and deactivate, so I can set this one to blank whenever I wanna, and this is going to be deactivated. So this is not going to be used. So it's going to collect all the errors. The errors are going to be collected all the time. There's no way to stop and start collecting the errors, but you can stop and start how and when to send that to the backend. So later on, whatever process you are doing, you want to send that back or activate again, then just set this. So if you call these multiple times with different endpoints or even with blank endpoints, this is going to do the trick.
Okay, thank you. The next question is the error logging module only available for OpenUI5 or also for SubUI5?
Because this is an open source module, I've built on top of OpenUI5, but as most of the things in UI5, if it's running in OpenUI5, it's going to work in UI5 as SAP UI5. So it works in both.
Okay, thanks.
And it's open source, so you don't need to pay anything to me.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, we got a couple, okay.
Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, since if we go now more through the productive usage, if a customer or if a user has a problem, how do you actually make sure that we also map it to the correct user? Because if somebody says, yeah, I have a problem with whatever, and then I get an error log of hundreds of users, I actually would have a problem.
That's correct. That's correct. So these would go together with what I said before for the data, right? So by default, the tool, the library is not going to get any user information. It's just the application, runtime application issues. If you want to enhance the data that you are capturing, you can use the hook. And then in this case, because we are using OData, we could have this function, and then this function could call the endpoint to get user information, get user, whatever should be your model here, and then get users, something like that. All right. So you enhance the data that you are going to pass to the endpoint. Possible to do that, and not by default. Not, you need to use the hook. You need to use a callback.
Thanks.
Okay, unfortunately, we only have time for one last question because we have to keep a little bit the agenda.
It's a quick one. Do you plan on adding this to best of UI5? And why haven't you done so yet?
I haven't done because I'm lazy, but yeah, I'm going to do that as soon as I have the time. So just to give some extra information just before we close up, let me just show. So this is the log being logged in the OData, and because we are in OData layer, I'm going to send the data to business application log, and then we have all the errors being captured in here. And because this came through unnoticed service and a validated, authenticated user, you would have the username here as well. So this would be one way to capture the username. So you don't need to enhance. If you are using OData with SAP backends, then you don't need to do anything. But if you are sending that to somewhere else, let's say to AWS, for example, I don't have the user data in here. I would need to enhance the data, the endpoint, and the callback that I'm using.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Mauricio, and please give him a big hand.
Thank you, everyone.